There are moments in life that change you forever, moments you never see coming. For me, that moment happened in a cold courtroom in Denver, Colorado. I was 24 years old, sitting on a hard wooden bench, watching my own mother raise her right hand and swear to tell the truth. Her name is Brenda. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Your Honor, my daughter abandoned this family. She left us when she was 18 with no warning, no explanation, and she has caused nothing but pain ever since." I couldn't breathe. I moved out when I was 18 because I couldn't take the control anymore, the curfews, the phone checks, the constant criticism. I didn't abandon anyone. I escaped. But there I was, being sued by my own parents for emotional distress, and my mother was testifying against me like I was a criminal. The worst part was that my younger sister Chloe was sitting in the front row crying, and I realized that my parents weren't just trying to punish me. They were trying to make sure Chloe never got the same idea. To understand why I left, you need to understand what it was like growing up in the Harris household. My parents Brenda and Mark were strict, not the kind of strict that keeps you safe but the kind that controls every breath you take. When I was 16, I wasn't allowed to have a phone password because my mom needed to monitor my conversations. When I was 17, I wasn't allowed to choose my own clothes because my dad said I dressed inappropriately. I wore jeans and t-shirts, nothing revealing, nothing wild. My sister Chloe, who was 2 years younger, got the same treatment. We weren't allowed to have friends over unless my parents approved them first. We weren't allowed to date. We weren't allowed to stay after school for clubs or sports. Every single decision was made for us. I tried to talk to them and said, "I'm almost an adult, I need some freedom." My mom laughed and said, "Freedom is for people who earn it. You haven't earned anything." That was the moment I realized they would never see me as a person. They saw me as property. And on my 18th birthday, I made a choice that would tear my family apart. On my 18th birthday, I waited until my parents fell asleep. I had been planning this for months. I saved money from a secret job I wasn't allowed to have, a coffee shop near school where I worked after classes. I packed one backpack with clothes, my birth certificate, and my social security card. I left a note on the kitchen table saying, "I love you but I can't live like this anymore, please don't look for me." Then I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I was terrified. I had no car, no apartment, and no backup plan, just a few $100s and a friend's couch to sleep on. For months, I didn't hear from my parents. I thought they were giving me space. I was wrong. They were building a case. 2 years later, I got a letter in the mail. It was a summons. My parents were suing me for emotional distress. They claimed my abandonment caused them mental anguish and they wanted compensation. I read that letter 5 times. I couldn't believe it. My own parents were taking me to court because I moved out at 18, and they wanted money I didn't have, money I was saving for community college. The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected. I walked into that courtroom feeling like a criminal. My parents were sitting on one side with a lawyer, a fancy lawyer in an expensive suit. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I represented myself. My mom was called to the stand first. She walked up with tears in her eyes, crying on command. The lawyer asked her questions. "Mrs. Harris, can you describe the night your daughter left?" My mom said it was devastating. She left a note like we were nothing, like 18 years meant nothing. Then the lawyer asked, "How did this affect your younger daughter Chloe?" My mom looked at Chloe and said Chloe was heartbroken. She cried for weeks. She felt abandoned by her big sister. She still struggles with trust issues because of what happened. I looked at Chloe and she was crying, but were those real tears or performance? I couldn't tell anymore. Then the lawyer asked my mom the question that made my blood boil. "Mrs. Harris, do you believe your daughter abandoned this family?" My mom looked straight at me and said yes. She abandoned us. She abandoned her sister. And she should be held accountable. Then it was my turn. I stood up and walked to the stand. My hands were shaking and my heart was pounding. I had never spoken in front of a judge before. I had never spoken against my parents before. The judge looked at me and said, "You may begin." I took a deep breath and said, "Your Honor, I moved out when I was 18 because I was being controlled, not protected, controlled." I looked at my mom and she was glaring at me. I continued. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to choose my own clothes. I wasn't allowed to have a phone password. I was treated like a prisoner in my own home. My dad stood up and said that's a lie. The judge told him to sit down. I kept going. I didn't abandon my sister. I tried to call her. I tried to text her. But my parents took her phone away. They isolated her from me. They used her as a weapon. I turned to Chloe and said, "I love you. I never stopped loving you. But I had to save myself. And I'm sorry if that hurt you, but I'm not sorry for leaving." Chloe looked down at her hands and didn't say anything. My mom started crying loudly, and the judge had to ask her to be quiet. Here's the thing about Chloe that my parents didn't want the court to know. She had tried to leave too. Twice. Both times, my parents called the police and reported her as a runaway, and she was brought back home both times. I had proof. Text messages from Chloe begging me to come get her, messages that said, "Please, I can't do this anymore, they won't let me leave." I showed those messages to the judge and said, "Your Honor, my sister is not hurt because I left. She is hurt because she is still trapped." My parents' lawyer objected, saying the messages were taken out of context, but the judge read them. He looked at my parents, then he looked at Chloe. He asked Chloe to come to the stand. Chloe walked up slowly, shaking. The judge asked her, "Is it true that you tried to leave home twice?" Chloe looked at my parents, then she looked at me, and she said yes. "It's true." My mom gasped. My dad put his head in his hands. Chloe started crying and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't lie anymore." That was the moment everything changed. The judge took a 15-minute break to review everything. Those 15 minutes felt like 15 years. I sat on that hard bench staring at the floor waiting for my life to be decided. When the judge came back, he looked at my parents first and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Harris, your daughter moved out when she was 18 years old. That is not abandonment. That is adulthood. She had every legal right to leave." My mom started crying again. The judge continued. "Furthermore, this court does not exist to punish children for wanting independence. This case is dismissed." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I also felt sad because I knew this wasn't a victory. It was just the end of a battle. The war with my parents would never really be over. As I walked out of the courtroom, my mom grabbed my arm and said, "You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I pulled my arm away and said, "I didn't destroy anything. You did. When you chose control over love." I walked out without looking back. Chloe ran after me and hugged me. She said, "Thank you for telling the truth." I hugged her back and said, "Call me when you're 18. I'll come get you." 2 years passed. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, and finally enrolled in community college. I was studying to become a paralegal. Ironic, right? After everything I went through in that courtroom, I wanted to help other young people who felt trapped. Chloe turned 18 6 months ago. True to my word, I drove to my parents' house and picked her up. She had one backpack just like I did. She looked scared but hopeful. I said, "You're going to be okay. I promise." She's living with me now, going to school, and learning what freedom feels like. My parents tried to take me to court again, this time for kidnapping. The judge laughed at them. Chloe was 18. She could leave whenever she wanted. The case was dismissed again. My parents lost again. I don't talk to my parents anymore. I don't hate them. I just don't have space for them in my life. They made their choice. They chose control. I chose freedom. And I would make the same choice every single time. Here is what I learned. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you become the people you need protection from. And that is not your fault. My parents believed that love meant control. They thought that if they kept me close they could keep me safe. But safety without freedom is just a nicer word for prison. If you are watching this and you feel trapped by your family, hear me. You are not a bad person for wanting to leave. You are not selfish for wanting to breathe. You are not abandoning anyone. You are saving yourself. And sometimes, saving yourself is the bravest thing you can do. I am Peyton. I walked out at 18. I survived. And so can you. The best revenge against people who tried to control you is not hatred. It is happiness. It is freedom. It is a life lived on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever been made to feel guilty for wanting independence, know that you are not alone. Your freedom is not a crime. Your voice is not rebellion. Your boundaries are not betrayal. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to leave. This is Peyton. See you in the next story. And remember, you are not responsible for your parents' happiness. You are responsible for your own.